What's up, guys? This is Nick, aka Stewie Stag, coming at you today with a brand new series for PokerVIP.com. This is kind of a continuation from the Get Stacking with Stewie series that I started. But we had a few discussions and we kind of decided that we wanted to branch off into more of these bite-sized sort of ideas. So this is going to be video number 1 of probably 8 or 9 in this series. They're going to last between 10 and 15 minutes. It might go a little bit longer, some of them, but I doubt it. I'm going to try and keep them nice and short for you guys. So if you just want to watch a video during a work break or something like that, or just want to watch a video before a session or something like that, you can just jump straight in there, watch this, and get out there and start crushing. So as you can see, part 1, we are going to be talking about pre-flop power, and then in this video, I'm going to be talking about adjusting. So yeah, let's get right on in there. So when we think about adjusting, we first need to think about the different types of villains we're going to face, different types of opponents. These are the 5 main types. There are kind of some players that kind of fit into numerous of these, but these are 5 easiest categories that you can split them into. So we have the tight aggressive tag player, the loose aggressive lag player, and the very tight players, the nits. And these 3 are the kind of the players who are probably going to be ones making profit at the table. Tag and lag are going to be the sort of players who are being quite aggressive, trying to bully tables, especially with hands, although lag players just bully players with anything. And the nitty players are the type of players who are just going to be very tight. They're going to only be playing value hands, and therefore a lot of the time they're going to get value. But then we also have the 2 most or least profitable players, so most profitable for us players, tight fish and aggressive fish, also known as maniacs. And these are the type of guys, the tight fish, the type of guys who limp into every pot and then fold when they miss the flop, or call us all the time and fold. T-fish slash P-fish. I was sort of taught P-fish for passive fish, very much a calling station, will call down with any 2, or the kind of player who is just going to fold a lot. And these type of players we're going to get so much value from, because we know that if they're calling, we can bet really big with our value hands and really small with draws. And against a player who's folding a lot, we can just bet all the time knowing they're going to fold, whether we have it or not. And the aggressive fish are the ones that a lot of you see out there, especially at the micro limits, although there are numbers of these higher up as well, who just blast, you know, who will just sit down $10 at a 10-nil table, $10 at a 20-nil table, it doesn't really matter, and they will just, you know, take the first few hands and either get it all in stupidly bad or whatever. And sometimes we've got on a hot run, you'll see a really aggressive, maniac-y kind of player sitting down with, you know, they're at their table and you haven't looked at their table for a while, and all of a sudden they've got 300 big blinds. You're thinking, what? And it's literally because they've just got it in crazy, and they're just spewing chips, and they happen to have had big hands when other people have bluff catched or whatever. So it is important to know these types of players, because they're going to be, this is the sort of the fundamentals behind being able to adjust pre-flop. Today we're going to be looking at these 3 types of players: the nit, the tight fish, and the aggressive fish, as these 3 are the easiest to adjust to. In part 2, which will be in another video, we will cover the regs of the tight aggressive and the loose aggressive players. So let's have a look at the nit. So we want to be thinking, when playing a tight player, what type of range they have, and they have a very, very tight range. You know, they're going to be folding a lot pre-flop, and therefore the obvious adjustment is to open wide. We want to be stealing their blinds at every opportunity, whether we're in the small blind against them, the button, the cutoff. If they're in the blinds, we want to be very aware that they're not going to be fighting back, because they don't want to be playing out of position. And therefore, like I said, we just want to be stealing often, not off tem. My bad for not being able to spell there. Pretty much, the average player is probably going to fold their blinds around 60 to 70% of the time at the micro stakes. I see some players folding more, some players folding less, but it generally falls in that kind of margin. These players are sort of like the 80% plus players. You'll see them folding to steals a lot, and therefore we want to be making sure we steal off them. Seeing as we have given them a very tight range, we also want to be free betting a tight range. We don't want to begin free bet bluffing them unless they have a tendency to open quite a lot of buttons and then fold a lot. We don't really want to be free betting, Queen Jack suited against them, because the likelihood is they're going to call with us dominated or 4-bet, and we're just going to be in a world of hurt post flop. So it's important just to free bet fairly tight. We also therefore want to be 4-betting even tighter. If we have a nit in the blinds and we raise them and they 3-bet, don't begin getting into the idea of thinking that we can 4-bet and get them to fold. It's just, if their range is tight, if they're like a 11-9 player or something like that, they're not 3-betting with many bluffs, and you might get them to fold ace-queen suited now and then. But 4-betting is just so pointless against these types of players. Flatting is fine with a lot of hands, but I just like to go ahead and fold the vast majority of my range, which against a looser player would flat or 4-bet, knowing that I'm going to get a lot of fold or be able to outplay in post flop. If we know our opponent has a range of ace, king, queens plus, it's not a great idea to begin 4-bet bluffing. But against their opens and 3-bets, we can definitely call profitably with suited connectors in position. This is because their range is going to be so readable, because they're going to have so many big pocket pairs, big Broadway hands, that we can kind of play pretty easy post flop against them, certainly in position. If we have 6-7 suited and the flop's all low cards and they fire 1, we can float, and if they're the type of player who's going to fire 1 and then give up on the turn, we can do that. And often the very tight players will be very much ABC players post flop, and they're only going to bet with hands anyway. So a lot of the time we're going to get to a point where we have something like 6-7 suited, we call, there's a 6 on the board, they check, we bet, and they're going to fold a lot of the time. And it's just, we take a hand which has a ton of equity against the top of their range. We're going to be able to, like I said, fold very comfortably. I mean, if they begin barreling off and we have a backdoor flush draw, we're not going to be looking to make any moves against them. But having that little bit of extra equity against their hands is very profitable in these kind of situations. And as their hands are so high in value pre-flop, it's going to be very hard for them to fold on a seemingly bland board. If they have aces in the board, and we have like I said, if we have 6-7 suits and there's board is 4-5-8, they're not going to see any reason why not to get pocket aces in there. So it's a great opportunity for us to get a big stack, and often we are just going to fold on the flop, but our implied odds are so great in these sort of situations that we can really profit in the long run due to the strength of their hands. Next type of player we're going to look at is the timid / passive fish. Generally, these players are going to be playing so many hands. These are the type of players who are probably playing, you'll see them playing sort of like a 70-10 kind of range. Those sort of crazy players. They're playing everything, yet they're not really being aggressive at any point. We want to be making sure that we're playing these fish as often as we can. We want to be opening very, very wide and to isolate them a lot. We don't want other regs coming in and taking our action away. We want to play these guys. If they're limping, we want to raise them big so no other regs are in the pot, so they fish calls and then snap folds on a flop that they miss. And the same goes for if they're on the button and we're in mid position, then even though we're out of position, we know that if we raise, the fish is going to call, and the blinds aren't going to be all that happy to squeeze that off. And it kind of is kind of like if we don't attack the fish and someone else does, that's our money gone. So that's really why we want to be opening wide. We also want to be free betting wide, because generally fish play very bad in free bet pots. These types of players, okay, if they've opened, they're going to have a fairly decent range. But if we free bet, they're kind of going to go into panic mode. If they have a strong hand, they're going to play very fast or very slow, depending on the player, of course. But it's going to be very obvious what they're doing. And if they have a weaker hand, they're kind of going to panic, and they're going to end up just calling and then folding as soon as they miss on the flop. So all of a sudden, we're making them, we're taking even more money post flop. So I love free betting wide against them. You could argue to go the other way. You can free bet tight as well. It's kind of how you pick a certain player, and that's all about adjusting. If you've got a player who is better to free bet very tight against, if they're timid, then that's fine. But I would say in general, if you've got a scared player, you want to be attacking them with absolutely everything. because they're just going to find so many folds, and they're not going to be fighting back unless they have a big hand. So it's more the fact that because they're going to be playing so their hand is going to be so face up post flop that we can make the pot big pre flop some of the time, because we're going to be able to take it down a lot post flop. However, we do want to be making sure we 4-bet tight. If we've got a timid fish who isn't raising much and then they 3-bet our open, it's just, it's not a spot where we want to be 4-betting light again. So just tighten up your 4-bet range against them and you should be fine. Position against timid fish is not as important as against some players. Now, it is helpful to be in position to a fish, but often what will happen is that they're just going to fold to a c-bet anyway. So being out of position doesn't really make a huge amount of difference. We're just going to c-bet any flop and they're just going to fold a lot of the time. It is helpful if they're the type of player that is more of a stationary kind of player, because if we lead the flop and they call, we're kind of like, what do we have? I mean, if we have a value hand, we're going to keep going for it, but if not, we're not sure if they're going to fold. So being in position to those type of players is more important, but I would say against these types of players, we just want to be in the pot against them because they're going to be folding a lot. The next type of opponent we're going to look against is aggressive fish. Now, there's a couple of different adjustments. I personally wouldn't play the adjustments I've put down here just because of my style against these type of players, but I've kind of given a very generic adjustment that you want to be making against them. Certainly if you're a 10-0, 20-0, 5-0 player, all those kind of limits, because these players we are going to be very profitable against. But you've got to remember as well that if they're being aggressive, we don't want to be playing a very wide range of hands against another wide range of hands, because at the end of the day, we're going to give in a lot of tough spots post-flop when we don't need to be. So I would say just play tight against these guys. If they're opening up everything, then they're just going to get it in with a lot of hands that we absolutely crush. So we can afford to play a little bit tight against them. By playing tight, I don't mean knit it right up. I mean be aware that they're aggressive and don't begin free betting wide or calling with speculative hands from the blind side. Just be aware that they are aggressive. They are trying to they're spewing, so just be aware. You don't want to get into a spot where you're facing an all-in with second pair and a backdoor flush draw on a flop or something like that. We want to be playing a lot wider in position than we are out position, because if we have a hand with good flop ability, we can then abuse our position and abuse them being out of position by raising bets or calling bets with fantastic implied odds and pot odds, etc. So being in position to these guys is a lot more important than the passive ones, just because they're not the type of player who's going to be folding that often, but we want their option, their aggression and their to come to us rather than us to try and bully them out. We want to be free betting tight against these guys. If these guys are opening a lot of hands, you could argue that you want to be free betting wider, but then if they're just 4-betting and it kind of just gets into a nasty sort of situation. So if we're free betting tight against these guys, I mean, like, if you free bet against this type of player, you want them to 4-bet so you can 5-bet shove or 5-bet click it back or whatever. You don't want to be free betting a wide range that you're not confident of getting it in, because like these guys are just going to spew more into you, and you're just going to be left there with ace jack suited thinking, can I profitably 5-bet shove here against this guy? It's not a great situation to be in. We want to be betting bigger with monsters pre-flop, and by that I mean if we're in mid position with aces and you've got a guy playing everything and has been very aggressive, you can afford to raise it 5x sometimes. I mean, one of my friends said he was playing on this one table and he had a guy who was playing every hand, he was just spewing, and he had aces and he literally opened to like 10 big blinds because he was playing every hand. He raised it to 10 big blinds, bet pot on the flop, and it was able to shove turn in a single raise pot when it was like 80 or 90 big blinds effective. I mean, that's crazy to be able to get it in so easily against these guys is great. And if you've got someone who is just blasting, you can bet a little bit smaller and induce, but I would say just bet bigger, and they're going to play them, and they're going to play their hand poorly, and we're just going to be able to take down big pots. Saying that though, we want to keep the small pre a lot of the time. It's going to get big post flop. If you've got a player who loves to raise your c bets, who loves to blast themselves, then we don't really need to worry about building a pot with ace king off pre, because if we miss, the pot's going to get big, and if we hit, the pot's going to get big, and therefore the times we hit, we're going to take a big pot, and the times we miss, we're just going to lose what we put in pre-flop, which hopefully is only going to be a few big blinds. Whereas if we begin getting into this like 3-bet war, 4-bet war, all of a sudden we go post-flop with ace king, and the pot's already like, you know, 15, 16 big blinds big, and we miss, and all of a sudden this fish is like just spewing into us, and we can't do anything, because if we shove, it's kind of just not a great spot we want to be in. We want to be taking our opponent's spewiness and exploiting that, rather than trying to help spew them, I suppose. So yeah, that's the end of today's show. Let's go back to the start, because it's a nice way to finish, I suppose. And yeah, I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you are going to enjoy this series. I'm going to continue with these presentations. I'm going to try and pump them out now. I'm real sorry I haven't been able to finish off some of the other things I've been doing. I've been away for a week. My headphones have been playing up. My headset hasn't been working. My laptop hasn't been working. There's been a lot of things, and I'm making a lot of excuses when I don't need to be making excuses, or I shouldn't have excuses. But you know, I'm going to try and come at you guys with tons and tons of content. And yeah, I hope you really enjoy this series and really get some stuff out of it. Next time, like I said, I'm going to be looking at adjusting against some of the better players out there, and then we're going to also branch off in some other things in future videos. So for now, that's all from me. Come back here and yeah, get out there and get stacking, guys.